Good morning, church family. Ron Branscombe here. I hope you've enjoyed going through the book of Revelations. That's always a great study, great reminder that Christ is victorious. Now we're going to go back to the Old Testament and we're going to start working through the minor prophets. And so we will start in the book of Hosea. And let me kind of set the stage for chapter 1 in this particular study. Hosea, who lived in the northern kingdom, and at the time, you got to remember the Israel and Judah, there were split nations. And so the bigger theme of Hosea, this particular book, is really a comparison of a marriage that an unfaithful marriage from the standpoint of adultery being committed, but the comparison being or back at that time, Israel was committing spiritual adultery on God and had turned from God. And so this particular theme and viewpoint gives us a great example of what a marriage looks like when you have faithfulness and you're seeking God compared to spiritual adultery. In chapter 1, we are introduced to Hosea, and God spoke to him to marry a harlot or a prostitute by the name of Gomer, and which is really not ideal situation, but again, this is all in God's plan. This is his message to Israel. And so Hosea was faithful and married Gomer, and they wound up having 3 children. And so these children's names wound up being pretty important. So the first one's name, and you'll have to bear with me on the names because some of these are tough, but the first one was a son, and the name being Israel. And this particular name means God scatters. And chapter 1 references the massacre at Israel, and so this is the tie-in of that name of God scatters. The second child is a daughter. Her name is Lo Ruhuma, and her name means not loved. So we have God scatters, the second child not loved, and then the third child is a boy by the name of Lo Ami, and that particular name means not my people. So we get a picture here of Hosea being faithful and doing what God asked him to do, marrying, and then the children reflecting the situation and God's really message to the Israelites at this time. So we get a picture here of Israel not being faithful to God. Eventually, at the end of chapter 1, these 3 names are going to flip. It's going to be that as Judah and Israel come back together and reunite and form as the sand on a seashore, that the names are going to be God's bringing together, and God loves, and these are my people. And it's a great picture of God's grace. So these 3 names of these children really gives us that great picture. I hope that you enjoy the study of Hosea, and I pray that you'll have a blessed day. God bless.